The shy girl's secret at the clinic, what the billionaire doctor discovered changed everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The morning sun had barely risen over downtown Chicago when the automatic doors of Westbridge Clinic slid open with a soft hiss. A faint smell of disinfectant hung in the air, and the sound of heels clicking against the polished floor echoed like a nervous heartbeat. Lila Morgan hesitated just inside the entrance, clutching a thin folder to her chest, her fingers white from the pressure. Her voice trembled when she approached the front desk. I have an appointment with Dr. Ethan Carter. The receptionist smiled politely, but Lila could feel every pair of eyes behind her. She tugged at her sleeve, hiding the faint scar on her wrist, a remnant of the surgery that changed everything 2 years ago. She hated hospitals, hated the cold light, the smell, the memories. But she had no choice. Her insurance had been canceled, and this was the only clinic offering low-cost exams through a charity program she'd heard about on the radio. A billionaire doctor running free medical days. It sounded like a rumor, the kind that poor people cling to when hope feels like a fairy tale. She took a shaky breath, following the nurse down the quiet corridor. The door at the end opened to a private consultation room, warm light spilling across a sleek desk. Behind it sat Ethan Carter, tall, mid-30s, dark hair brushed back, stethoscope hanging loosely around his neck. He looked up from his tablet, his gaze calm but alert. "You must be Miss Morgan," he said softly. His voice was steady, reassuring in a way that made her chest tighten. "Please, have a seat." Lila lowered herself into the chair, avoiding his eyes. She expected arrogance, the cold professionalism of the wealthy. Instead, she felt something different, a strange patience, the kind that disarmed her defenses. "How are you feeling today?" he asked. "Fine," she lied quickly. He tilted his head. "Fine doesn't usually come with shaking hands." Lila looked down. "It's just, doctors make me nervous." Ethan smiled faintly. "Understandable, but I promise, no needles today." Her lips twitched at that, a ghost of a smile breaking through the anxiety. He glanced at the chart in front of him. "It says here you've had complications from a previous surgery?" Her shoulders tensed. "Yes, but it's nothing. I just want to make sure everything's okay." Ethan nodded slowly. "We'll figure that out together." When he stood, his white coat brushed against her chair, and for a split second, she caught the scent of soap and something warm cedar, maybe. He moved with quiet authority, but there was nothing performative in it. As he adjusted the light, she noticed a photo frame on his desk, a picture of a hospital wing with a plaque reading, "Carter Foundation, Free Care for All." Her pulse slowed. Could it really be true? That a man who looked like he belonged in magazines actually spent his time treating people like her? "You started this program?" she blurted before she could stop herself. Ethan glanced at her, surprised, then nodded. "Yes. My mother used to say healing isn't real if it's only for the rich." Something softened in his eyes, something that looked almost like grief. Lila bit her lip, guilt mixing with curiosity. "She sounds kind." "She was," he said quietly. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was human. Ethan gestured gently. "Let's take a look, all right?" She hesitated, heart pounding, every nerve screaming to flee, but his calm, unhurried presence anchored her. As he examined the faint surgical mark on her abdomen, his brow furrowed, but not with judgment, with concern. "Who performed this procedure?" he asked. "A hospital. Downtown. They said it was routine." "It wasn't," Ethan murmured, half to himself. "They missed something." Her breath hitched. "Missed something?" He looked up, his tone steady but serious. "You've been in pain because of a mistake that should have been caught. I'll need to run a few tests, but I think we can fix it." Her eyes filled before she could blink them back. For years, no one had said those words, "We can fix it." She covered her face, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I just..." "Don't apologize," Ethan said softly. "You've been carrying this alone for too long." In that sterile white room, under the hum of fluorescent lights, Something invisible began to heal not just her body, but the part of her that had stopped believing in mercy. And as Ethan turned back to his notes, his eyes caught the lavender bookmark peeking out of her folder. Lavender Hope. It read the name of his foundation. He smiled faintly, unaware that this meeting, this fragile moment of trust, would soon change both of their lives forever. That night, the city hummed quietly under the drizzle as Dr. Ethan Carter sat alone in his office. The clinic had emptied hours ago, yet the faint light spilling from his desk lamp stayed on. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the chart that belonged to Lila Morgan. The test results confirmed what his instincts had already told him. Her previous surgery had been mishandled. A foreign suture left inside her abdomen had caused chronic inflammation, the reason for her pain. He exhaled slowly, anger flickering beneath his calm surface. Somewhere, a careless surgeon had written a report, closed a file, and walked away. He glanced at the signature line on the paperwork. The logo of a large hospital chain stared back at him, Carter Health Group, his own company. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, realizing the cruel irony. His empire, built on modern medicine and ethics, had also caused suffering. The sound of rain against the window grew louder. For the first time in years, the billionaire doctor felt small. He opened the folder again, studying her handwriting on the intake form. Every letter seemed careful, shy, almost apologetic. No insurance. Lives alone. Emergency contact. None. He traced the words with his thumb and thought of her trembling hands, the way she had tried to smile through fear. There was dignity in her silence, strength in her shame. He could not ignore that. The next morning, Lila stood outside the clinic doors before they opened. She had barely slept. Every word from the previous day replayed in her mind. They missed something. We can fix it. Hope was a dangerous thing for people like her. She stared at her reflection in the glass, pale, tired eyes framed by damp curls. A nurse unlocked the doors and smiled politely, and soon she found herself back in the same room as before. Ethan walked in moments later, his white coat crisp, his expression calm but unreadable. "Good morning, Miss Morgan," he greeted. "I ran additional tests last night to be sure. Would you like to sit?" Lila nodded, clutching her bag tightly. "Is it bad?" she asked. Ethan sat across from her, his tone gentle. "It is not life-threatening, but the surgery you had 2 years ago left a piece of dissolvable thread that never fully dissolved. It is what has been causing the pain and swelling." Lila blinked. "So, it was their fault?" He hesitated. "It was the fault of a system that treated you like a number." She frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice low. "The hospital that performed your operation was part of Carter Health Group. That means it was under my ownership." Her eyes widened, disbelief flashing across her face. "Yours?" He nodded slowly. "Yes. And I am sorry, Lila. You deserved better care. You deserved to be seen." Her lips trembled as she looked away. "I thought people like you never saw people like me." "You are wrong," he said softly. "I see you now." The silence that followed was heavy but not hostile. Ethan continued, "I want to help you. I can arrange for a corrective procedure at no cost to you, and I will personally oversee it, but I will not do anything without your permission." Lila's throat tightened. "Why would you do that?" "Because healing is not just about medicine," he said. "It is about making things right." For the first time, her eyes met his without fear. There was something steady in his gaze, something that made her believe he meant every word. "Let me think about it," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "Of course, take your time." As she left the clinic, the rain had stopped. The clouds were parting, letting in a pale band of sunlight across the wet pavement. Lila walked slowly toward the bus stop, clutching the folder to her chest. Inside it was the lavender bookmark, its edges worn. She turned it over, reading the printed words again, Lavender Hope Foundation. She finally understood. He had not just built hospitals. He had built second chances. Back inside his office, Ethan watched from the window as she disappeared down the street. He whispered to himself, "We will fix this, Lila, one way or another." What he did not know yet was that this act of compassion would uncover a truth far darker than either of them imagined. 3 days later, the sound of morning traffic filled the street outside the clinic, as Dr. Ethan Carter sat in a quiet meeting room with his assistant. His mind was not on the chart spread before him, but on the young woman who had walked out of his office with cautious hope. He had reviewed her medical file again and again, not because he doubted his diagnosis, but because something about her case did not add up. The original surgical report was incomplete. Key pages were missing, and the doctor's signature was blurred beneath a digital stamp. Ethan frowned, tapping the document. "Who approved this?" he asked. His assistant glanced over his shoulder. It was done 2 years ago at Central City Hospital, under the previous management of Carter Health Group. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Find me everything on that surgery, every note, every billing record, every name attached." He did not raise his voice, but the weight of authority in it made his assistant nod and hurry out. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. There was a growing knot in his chest that told him this was more than a careless mistake. That afternoon, Lila returned to work at the small flower shop where she arranged bouquets for couples and anniversaries she could never afford herself. The bell above the door jingled softly as she moved between the rows of roses and lilies, her fingers brushing petals as if they were fragile promises. Her coworker, Maria, glanced at her. "You look different today," she said. "Did something good happen?" Lila smiled faintly. "Maybe. I met a doctor who actually listens." Maria laughed. "Those are rare. Hold on to him." Lila rolled her eyes, but her smile lingered. As she wrapped a bouquet, her abdomen ached a dull, constant reminder of what had gone wrong. Yet for the first time in years, she felt that maybe it could be fixed. When she closed the shop at sunset, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Ethan stepped out, dressed in a dark suit, his expression calm but firm. "Lila," he called gently. She froze, startled. "Dr. Carter? What are you doing here?" He held up a folder. "I needed to speak with you in person. May I?" Hesitant but curious, she nodded and let him step inside the shop. The smell of flowers wrapped around them as he set the folder on the counter. "I found something," he said quietly. "Your operation was billed as a teaching procedure. That means it was done by a trainee, not a licensed surgeon." The supervising physician signed off without review. They hid the mistake under a false report. Lila's breath caught. "So they experimented on me?" "In a way, yes," Ethan replied, his jaw tightening. "And that is not the worst part. The doctor who approved it, Dr. Nathan Carter, is my half-brother." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Lila stepped back, shaking her head. "Your brother? The one who—" "Yes," Ethan interrupted softly. "He managed the surgical training program before I took over the company. I thought he had resigned quietly. Now I see why he vanished." Lila's voice broke. "You are saying the man who ruined my life is your family?" Ethan's gaze held hers, filled with regret. "Blood does not mean loyalty, Lila. I swear to you, I did not know, but I will not let this go unpunished." Tears welled in her eyes. "How do I trust you now?" He hesitated, then reached into the folder and pulled out a document. "Because I already reported him to the state medical board this morning. He is under investigation, and I have authorized full coverage for your corrective surgery at no cost. Not as a favor, but as justice." Lila stared at the papers, her chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. "Why are you doing this for me?" she whispered. "Because you reminded me of what medicine is supposed to be," he said. "Healing, not hiding." She wiped her eyes and let out a shaky laugh. "You talk like it is that simple." Ethan smiled faintly. "It is not, but it starts with one person doing the right thing." He turned toward the door, but paused. "I will have my driver take you to the hospital tomorrow if you are ready. No pressure, just know the choice is yours." When he left, Lila stood in the fading light, staring at the folder in her hands. For years, she had been invisible to the world of the powerful. Now, one of them was fighting for her. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, she felt the weight of her fear begin to lift. Outside, the first stars appeared above the city skyline, reflected in the shop window beside her. In their faint glow, she whispered, "Maybe this time, healing will mean something real." The following morning, the city awoke under a clear blue sky as if the storm had finally passed. Lila stood at the hospital entrance, clutching the strap of her bag, heart pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. This was the same hospital chain that had failed her years ago, but today felt different. She was not a helpless patient anymore. She had a voice and someone who believed her. Inside, Dr. Ethan Carter was already waiting, reviewing her charts with the same quiet focus that had both intimidated and comforted her. When he saw her step into the room, he smiled gently. "You came." Lila nodded nervously. "I said I would think about it." "And I did. I am ready." Ethan gestured toward the examination chair. "Good. This will not take long. We will schedule the procedure for tomorrow morning, and I will personally supervise everything." She hesitated, glancing around the sleek, white room. "I never thought I would come back here," she admitted. "The last time I was in a hospital like this, I woke up to pain in silence." Ethan's voice softened. "Then let us make sure this time you wake up to healing." His words were calm, but beneath them she could feel the sincerity that had drawn her to trust him. The nurse entered to take her vitals, and the machines beeped softly in rhythm with her pulse. Ethan turned to his tablet, reviewing one last detail. On the screen flashed a file labeled Nathan Carter, Investigation Pending. For a brief moment, anger flickered in his eyes before he closed the tablet and forced a steady breath. The next day arrived sooner than either of them expected. The hospital wing reserved for foundation patients was quiet, with sunlight spilling across the polished floors. Lila was prepped for surgery, her gown crisp and her hands trembling slightly. Ethan entered the pre-op room, wearing scrubs and a gentle expression that made her chest tighten. "Are you sure about this?" he asked softly. "We can still wait if you are not ready." Lila shook her head. "No. I have waited long enough. I just want to feel normal again." Ethan nodded, adjusting the blanket over her shoulders. "You will, I promise." As she was wheeled toward the operating room, she caught sight of the lavender emblem stitched on his badge, the symbol of his foundation. It reminded her of the bookmark she carried everywhere, now tucked safely in her bag. Inside the sterile white room, Ethan gave clear, precise instructions to the team. He moved with calm authority, his tone professional but gentle, making sure every nurse understood the protocol. As anesthesia began to flow through the IV line, Lila's voice trembled. "Dr. Carter?" He leaned closer, his eyes kind. "Yes?" "If I do not wake up," she whispered, "thank you for seeing me." His hand found hers, firm and reassuring. "You will wake up, Lila. I will make sure of it." Hours later, the operation was complete. The offending suture was removed, the infection treated, and the incision carefully repaired. When Lila opened her eyes, the light above her was softer, warmer. Her throat was dry, her body weak, but for the first time in years, the pain was gone. Ethan stood beside her bed, his mask lowered, exhaustion visible in the curve of his shoulders. Yet his eyes gleamed with relief. "You did it," he said quietly. She managed a faint smile. "You mean you did it?" He shook his head. "Healing is teamwork." Over the following days, Lila's recovery became a small miracle inside the hospital. Nurses whispered about the mysterious patient in the charity wing whose case had drawn the attention of the billionaire doctor himself. Ethan visited daily, sometimes bringing tea instead of charts. They spoke about small things, her favorite flowers, his mother's old sayings, how both of them had learned to survive loss. Each conversation felt like stitching two broken souls back together. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Ethan stood by her bed with a file in his hand. "The investigation against my brother has moved forward," he said. "The medical board has suspended his license, and the foundation will cover restitution for all patients affected by his negligence." Lila's eyes widened. "You did that?" He nodded. "We did. You gave me a reason to make things right." Silence filled the room, heavy with emotion but light with peace. For the first time, Lila felt the weight of her past begin to lift. Outside, the sky turned gold, reflecting against the glass walls. She looked at him and whispered, "Thank you, Ethan. Not just for fixing me, but for listening." He smiled softly. "You taught me that listening is the first step to healing." In that quiet room, surrounded by the steady hum of machines, something pure took root between them. Not romance yet, but something deeper, fragile, and real. 2 weeks later, the sterile scent of the hospital had been replaced by the gentle aroma of lavender. Lila had been moved to a recovery suite overlooking the city, where sunlight poured through the tall windows and birds landed occasionally on the balcony rail. She was stronger now, able to walk short distances, her steps slow but steady. Each morning, Dr. Ethan Carter would arrive with his coffee and a warm smile, checking her chart and asking how she had slept. Their conversations had become less about medicine and more about life. One morning, He found her by the window, sketching quietly on a notepad. "You draw?" he asked, surprised. Lila turned, cheeks pink. "Just a little. It helps me focus." He leaned over to look. On the page was a delicate pencil drawing of lavender sprigs, shaded with remarkable care. "That is beautiful," he said softly. "You have an artist's eye." She smiled shyly. "Maybe I just spent too long looking at flowers." Ethan chuckled. "That explains why you see beauty where most people do not." He meant it, and she could hear it in his tone. It was not flattery, it was truth. Over the following days, Ethan noticed how her laughter began to return, how she spoke more openly about her past. She told him about her mother, who had worked double shifts at a diner to afford her education, and how she had passed away before Lila could finish college. He listened quietly, never interrupting, only offering a few words when the silence grew heavy. "Your mother would be proud," he said one afternoon, after she confessed her guilt about not being there when her mother died. Lila smiled faintly. "I hope so." There was a pause. Then she asked, "What about you? You never talk about your family." Ethan hesitated, his jaw tightening slightly. "My mother was the kindest person I ever knew," he said finally. "She was a nurse. She built the first free care clinic before I ever became a doctor. My father was a businessman who saw medicine as profit. When she died, he expanded the company, turning it into Carter Health Group." Nathan followed him. "I built the foundation to make it right." Lila looked at him with quiet admiration. "So that is why you do what you do. You are trying to keep her promise." He nodded, his eyes distant. "She believed every life deserved dignity. I lost sight of that for a while, until you reminded me." Their eyes met for a moment that lasted too long. Then Ethan cleared his throat and glanced at the monitor beside her bed. "Your vitals look great," he said with a faint smile. "You might be ready to go home soon." She tried to sound casual, but there was a hint of sadness in her voice. "Home feels different now." "That is not a bad thing," he said gently. "Sometimes healing means leaving the old world behind." That night, as the city glowed below, Lila found herself unable to sleep. The quiet hum of the machines beside her felt almost comforting now. She reached for the lavender bookmark resting on her nightstand and traced its edges. It reminded her of everything that had changed the pain, the fear, the slow return of hope. The door opened softly, and Ethan stepped inside, still in his white coat. "You should be resting," she teased lightly. He smiled. "I could say the same to you." He walked to her bedside, lowering his voice. "I wanted to tell you something before you are discharged tomorrow." Her heart fluttered, though she did not know why. "What is it?" He pulled a small envelope from his pocket. Inside was a folded brochure that read, "Lavender Hope Art Program. We are starting a community project," he explained. "A free art therapy class for patients recovering from trauma and illness. I would like you to lead it." Lila stared at him in disbelief. "Me? But I am not." "You are exactly who it needs," he said firmly. "Someone who understands that healing is more than physical." Tears welled in her eyes as she took the brochure. "Ethan, I do not know what to say." "Say yes," he replied softly, "and we will figure out the rest together." In that moment, surrounded by the soft light of the monitors and the quiet heartbeat of a city that had once felt too big for her, Lila realized that healing was not about returning to who she was. It was about becoming who she was meant to be. She smiled through her tears. "Yes," she whispered. "I will do it." Ethan's smile widened, relief washing over his face. "Good. Then tomorrow, you start the next chapter of your life, and so do I." The two of them stood in the silence that followed, not as doctor and patient, but as two people who had found something neither of them expected. Hope reborn. The grand opening of the Lavender Hope Art Program took place 3 months later, inside a renovated wing of the Foundation Hospital. The once empty hall had been transformed into a space filled with color and life. Canvases lined the walls, jars of paint stood on wooden tables, and sunlight streamed through large glass windows that overlooked the city skyline. Lila stood near the entrance, her heart pounding with pride and disbelief. She wore a soft lavender dress and held a clipboard in her trembling hands. "You did this," a familiar voice said behind her. She turned to see Dr. Ethan Carter standing there, dressed casually for once, no white coat, just a light blue shirt with rolled sleeves. "We did this," she corrected, smiling. "You gave me the chance. I just tried not to ruin it." Ethan laughed softly. "You did more than that. You turned a hospital wing into a sanctuary." He glanced around, watching patients and visitors filter into the room. There were children painting, elderly men learning to sketch, and nurses hanging framed artwork from earlier sessions. The air buzzed with quiet joy. When Lila walked to the front to greet the guests, Ethan watched her from a distance. There was something radiant about her now. The shy girl who had once feared hospitals had become a beacon of hope inside one. After the ceremony, reporters gathered to interview Ethan about the program. "Why art?" one of them asked. He looked toward Lila before answering. "Because medicine heals the body, but art heals the soul," he said. "And sometimes, the soul needs it more." The next few weeks passed in a blur of progress. Lila led classes twice a week, teaching patients to paint what they felt but could not say. Ethan often stopped by after rounds, standing quietly in the back, just watching. Their friendship had deepened into something wordless and steady, yet both of them avoided naming it. One rainy evening, the elevator opened to reveal Lila carrying a box of brushes. Ethan was waiting near the reception desk, drenched from the storm. "You will catch a cold," she scolded lightly. He smiled. "Occupational hazard. I came to see how your class went." "It was wonderful," she said, her eyes bright. "One of the patients who could barely move his hand last month just finished his first painting." Ethan's expression softened. "That is the miracle, right? Healing through creation." She nodded. "It reminds me that pain can make something beautiful too." There was a pause, filled with unspoken meaning. Then she added quietly, "You taught me that." The words lingered between them, like a heartbeat. He took a breath, choosing his next words carefully. "Lila, there is something I need to tell you. The board has offered me a position overseeing all Carter Foundation clinics nationwide. It would mean moving to New York." The smile faded from her face. "New York?" He nodded. "It is a big step, but I do not want to take it if it means losing what we have built here." Lila looked down at her hands, her fingers still speckled with paint. "You will not lose it. You gave me a purpose, Ethan. I will keep this place alive." He looked at her for a long moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small lavender-colored pin engraved with the Foundation's emblem. "Then this belongs to you," he said. "You are the heart of Lavender Hope now." Her throat tightened as he pinned it gently on her dress. "You really trust me with this?" "Completely," he said. "You turned my mother's dream into something living. I cannot think of anyone else who deserves it more." For the rest of the night, the rain kept falling, tapping softly against the glass walls as they stood side by side in silence. The world outside blurred into streaks of silver and gold, and for a brief, fragile moment, it felt like time had stopped. In that stillness, both of them knew that what had begun as a story of healing had quietly become something else, something deeper, stronger, and far more real. But neither of them dared to say it out loud. Not yet. Autumn arrived quickly, painting the city in shades of amber and gold. The Lavender Hope art program had grown beyond anything Lila could have imagined. Patients from neighboring hospitals were now attending weekly sessions, and local artists had volunteered to mentor them. Every brushstroke, every laugh echoing down the hallway reminded her how far she had come from the frightened girl who once avoided hospitals altogether. Yet, even as her world blossomed, a quiet ache remained. Ethan had left for New York 2 months ago. At first, they talked often through video calls and emails, discussing the Foundation's progress and new initiatives. But lately, his responses had become shorter, less frequent, always ending with the same line, "We will talk soon." Lila tried to convince herself that he was simply busy, but deep down, she felt the distance growing like an unspoken storm. One rainy evening, she stayed late at the center to lock up. The art room was empty except for the soft glow of the lamps and the faint scent of paint. She paused by a finished canvas, a landscape of lavender fields under a golden sky, painted by a young patient who had recently completed treatment. She smiled, touching the corner of the frame, whispering, "You made it." The sound of her phone vibrating broke the silence. It was an email alert. Her eyes widened when she saw the sender, Carter Health Group Board. The message was brief but sharp. The board had approved a merger with a private corporation known for cutting charity programs. Effective immediately, Lavender Hope's funding would be reviewed. Lila felt her stomach drop. She reread the lines, her pulse racing. The signature at the bottom read, "Approved by Dr. Nathan Carter, Interim Executive Director." Nathan. the man who had nearly destroyed her life. Her hands trembled as she dialed Ethan's number. He answered on the third ring, his voice tired but warm. "Lila, it is late there. Are you all right?" "No," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I just received an email from the board. Nathan is listed as executive director. They are threatening to cut the program." Ethan went silent. The silence stretched so long that she thought the call had dropped. Finally, he spoke. "He cannot be. He was suspended. This must be a mistake." "It is not a mistake," she said firmly. "His signature is right there. Ethan, if this merger happens, everything we built will disappear." Ethan's tone hardened. "I will handle it. I will fly back tomorrow." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," he said. "This is not just about the foundation anymore. It is about what is right." The next morning, the news broke across financial networks. Carter Health Group's merger with Price and Medical had been fast-tracked. Stock prices surged, and corporate spokespeople praised new efficiency initiatives. Lila watched the headlines from her phone, her chest tight with anger. Hours later, Ethan arrived at the foundation, still in his travel coat, his expression grim. "I spoke with the board," he told her. "They claim Nathan convinced them he was fit to return. They framed it as a redemption story to gain investor confidence." "Redemption?" she repeated bitterly. "After what he did?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I know. That is why I am calling an emergency review. He will not touch this place again." They walked through the art room together, the scent of fresh paint and hope mixing with the tension in the air. "He will try to destroy everything that reminds him of his failure," Ethan said quietly, "including you." Lila met his gaze, unflinching. "Then he will have to face me first." For the first time, Ethan smiled, not with charm, but with pride. That is the Lila I remember. The evening ended with them standing side by side at the window, the city lights flickering like 1,000 promises below. The road ahead was uncertain, but one truth remained unshakable. The fight for Lavender Hope and for each other had only just begun. The following week, the foundation building buzzed with tension as word spread that the board meeting would determine the future of the Lavender Hope program. Reporters gathered outside, cameras flashing, their voices overlapping as they speculated about the rumored power struggle between Dr. Ethan Carter and his half-brother Nathan. Inside, the atmosphere was even heavier. Lila stood in the hallway outside the glass conference room, her palms damp, watching Ethan prepare his notes. He looked calm, but she could see the tightness in his jaw. "You do not have to go through this alone," she whispered. He glanced at her, offering a faint smile. "I am not alone," he said softly. Then he stepped into the room. Through the glass walls, Lila could see Nathan already seated at the far end of the long table, impeccably dressed, his expression cool and confident. When Ethan entered, Nathan stood with exaggerated politeness. "Brother," he said smoothly, "it has been too long." Ethan met his gaze evenly. "Not long enough." The meeting began, and voices rose and fell like waves. Nathan spoke first, presenting colorful charts about efficiency and profit margins, his tone polished and persuasive. "We cannot afford to waste millions on sentiment," he declared. "Programs like Lavender Hope are unsustainable. They distract from the company's primary mission." Ethan listened quietly, letting him finish. Then he stood. His voice was steady, but carried a sharp edge that commanded the room. "Our mission," he said, "is not profit. It is healing. My mother built this company on compassion, and I will not watch it be turned into a machine that values dollars over people." Nathan smirked. "Compassion does not keep the lights on." "No," Ethan replied, "but it keeps humanity alive." The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Ethan tapped his tablet, projecting patient testimonials onto the screen behind him, photos of smiling children, recovering veterans, and survivors holding their first paintings. "These," he said, "are the lights that matter. These lives, these stories." Lila watched through the glass, her heart swelling with pride. Then Nathan leaned forward, voice sharp. "You are letting your emotions blind you. You forget, Ethan, this company carries my name too." "A name you disgraced," Ethan shot back. "You nearly cost a woman her life because you treated her as a statistic. That woman is standing right outside this room." Nathan's head snapped toward the window. For a second, their eyes met Lila's gaze, steady, unflinching. The boardroom fell silent. Ethan continued, "Lila Morgan was one of your patients." You left a foreign object inside her during surgery and falsified the report. If you want to talk about efficiency, let us start with accountability." The board erupted in whispers. Nathan's composure cracked. "You cannot prove—" Ethan raised a hand, cutting him off. "I already did. The state medical board has reopened your case. The evidence is here." He placed a sealed folder on the table. The room went still. Nathan's face drained of color as one of the board members opened the file. Within seconds, the decision was unanimous. Nathan's contract was terminated effective immediately, and the merger was halted pending further review. As security escorted him out, he passed Lila in the hallway, his expression a mix of fury and disbelief. "You think you won," he hissed. She met his glare calmly. "I did not win. The truth did." When he was gone, Ethan stepped out of the conference room, shoulders slumping with exhaustion. Lila met him halfway, eyes shining. "You did it," she breathed. He shook his head. "We did it. You gave me the courage to fight." Outside, the reporters swarmed as the news broke that the Lavender Hope Foundation had been saved. But inside, in the quiet corridor lined with artwork, Ethan and Lila simply stood together, letting the relief wash over them. "What happens now?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Now, we rebuild. Not just the foundation, but everything it stands for." She nodded, her hand brushing against his. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world outside was loud and chaotic, but within those walls, peace finally returned, fragile yet certain, just like the first bloom of lavender after a long, harsh winter. 6 months later, spring returned to the city, painting the skyline in gentle gold as morning light filtered through the glass walls of the Lavender Hope Foundation. The air carried the scent of fresh flowers and new beginnings. Lila stood in the garden courtyard, arranging lavender plants along the path that led to a small stage. Today was the official reopening of the foundation after its victory over the corporate battle that nearly destroyed it. But more than a ceremony, it felt like a homecoming. Patients, volunteers, and staff filled the space, their laughter mingling with the sound of music from a nearby quartet. In the center of it all stood a new sign: Lavender Hope, Rehabilitation and Art Center, where healing begins again. Lila took a deep breath, her heart full. She looked around for Ethan, who was nowhere in sight. "Typical," she murmured with a smile. Late to his own event. As if on cue, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "I prefer fashionably late." She turned to see Ethan walking toward her, dressed in a simple gray suit, carrying a small box in his hand. "You look incredible," he said sincerely. "And this place, it is everything we dreamed of." "We dreamed it together," she replied softly. "I am just glad you came back." "I could not stay away," he said. "Not from this, not from you." Before she could respond, the host announced Ethan's name over the microphone. He walked up to the stage, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. "6 months ago," he began, "we stood on the edge of losing something that meant more than a program, it meant hope. But today, we stand stronger, not because of money or power, but because of people who refuse to give up. People like Lila Morgan." The crowd erupted in applause, and Lila's eyes glistened as Ethan gestured for her to join him. Hesitant but smiling, she climbed the steps to stand beside him. "This woman," he continued, "reminded me what medicine truly means. She reminded me that healing is not just science, it is compassion, courage, and connection. And because of her, Lavender Hope will continue to help anyone who needs it, no matter who they are." The applause grew louder, echoing through the courtyard. Ethan turned to her and opened the small box he had been holding. Inside was a silver necklace with a delicate pendant, shaped like a lavender flower. "This is for you," he said quietly so only she could hear. "A symbol of everything you restored." Her fingers trembled as she touched the pendant. "Ethan, I do not know what to say." "Say you will stay," he replied. "Not because I ask you to, but because this place is part of you now." She smiled through tears. "I was never going anywhere." After the ceremony, as the crowd began to disperse, Ethan and Lila walked along the path lined with lavender. The sun had begun to set, casting soft shades of pink and orange across the sky. "Do you ever think about how it all started?" she asked. "A nervous girl walking into a clinic?" He chuckled. "And a doctor who thought he had seen everything. Turns out, he had not." They stopped near the fountain, where the water shimmered under the fading light. Ethan turned to her, his expression tender. "Lila, there is one more thing I have to ask." He reached into his pocket again, this time pulling out a small velvet box. Her breath caught as he opened it to reveal a simple diamond ring. "I am not asking as a doctor or as the head of a foundation," he said softly. "I am asking as the man who watched you rebuild your life with grace and strength. Will you marry me?" The world seemed to go silent except for the sound of the fountain. Lila covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now. "Ethan," she whispered. "Yes, yes, I will." The crowd nearby noticed and began to cheer, the sound rising like a wave of joy through the evening air. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into an embrace. "From healing to love," he murmured. "You taught me both." Lila rested her head against his shoulder, her heart calm and full. Around them, the lavender swayed gently in the breeze, glowing in the last light of the day. The camera of a foundation volunteer captured the moment. Two people, once broken by pain, now bound by purpose. And as the lights of the city flickered on, the story of the shy girl and the billionaire doctor came full circle, not ending, but beginning again with hope.